All right, so we're going to go right away to Frank calling in from the US of A. Wants to know why we don't hold a belief in God. Frank, you're on the Atheist Experience. How are you doing today?
Hey, it's amazing to be here. It's grateful to have this conversation with you guys. Let's get into it.
Yeah, man. So what exactly did you want to ask?
Well, I don't want to ask anything. I actually want to teach you guys that God is real and God does exist. And when you try to sidestep God with your ideology, you're actually making a huge mistake, not only for your own salvation, but for the wellness of humanity.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So why don't we start with just like the smallest thing is I guarantee every single thing you just said, I could talk about it for 5 minutes. So like, if I don't want to waste all your time. So, um, the question that I have on the screen here says, why don't we hold a belief in God? Maybe that would be a good place to like jump off from. Cause like that way you can kind of give us a counter. Is that okay with you?
That's fine. I think free will is a big part of that. The reason a lot of people don't believe in God is because they have the will to choose to not believe in God. And that's where you ended up where you are.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't. I mean, I would argue that belief isn't something that you choose. It's something that like kind of happens to you because you don't decide whether to believe something is real or not. You
Yeah.
have to have a reason. So like for me, I need evidence for these things. I need a reason to believe that's better than just I want to.
Yeah. To
And
piggyback on your comment, Frank, can you choose to believe that there's a pink elephant floating in the room with you right now? Using your free will, can you choose
I have that.
to believe that?
I have that right. I believe I have that right, but is it a plausible belief? I think is the more important question.
Okay, but can you
right, for sure.
choose it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we talk about creation, right, when we talk about existence, when we talk about things like free will, when we talk about love, when we talk about joy, I mean, I feel like the problem with the atheist perspective is that you guys don't, you have a fundamental misunderstanding about what those things truly are. For me, the spirit is a huge part of the human experience. And let's start there. The spirit.
The spirit.
So
what is
the spirit?
Yeah, what is the spirit?
The spirit is the soul behind our flesh that moves us to make the decisions that we make and to do the things that we do.
Okay. So what's your evidence that such a thing exists?
I'm not going to be able to like show you this in a scientific perspective because that's not the way faith and belief works.
Well, then why does it matter? Is the next
Molecules.
question.
We're not. Well, it matters because you can't even love someone without an understanding of the spirit.
I love my wife very much, and I don't believe that spirits exist.
That's fine, but what is love to you? Is it like a chemical swirl in your brain, or is it something more?
No, it's pretty much a chemical swirl in my brain. It's a series of electrochemical reactions happening in my head that produce an emotion. She happens to be the only human being in the world that triggers that electrochemical reaction for me that I know of. Who knows? Maybe there'd be somebody else out there too. But like, I know she makes me very happy, and the behaviors and the actions and the beliefs and the her personality, everything that she displays brings that out in me. And so that's all that is. It's a wonderful feeling that bonds societies, and there's a whole bunch of really cool science behind it. This is something that I can very easily like look to the literature and pull an understanding of. I don't need any kind of magical thinking to understand that, nor do I need magical thinking to enjoy it. Even if I didn't understand it, it's something wonderful that I have. I don't need to add this caveat of, and also there's this other thing called the spirit that I have no reason to believe in as well.
With all due respect, don't you feel like you're missing like a little piece of the puzzle when you reduce it to molecules and chemical reactions? I mean, just
not even a little bit.
Who has lived a life. Not even a little bit.
No.
Huh?
No, it's like when people ask me, like, I something that I've heard quite frequently is well, you as an atheist, you don't see the beauty of like some flower or something like that. There's this beautiful rose in this garden, and you don't get to appreciate what it is because you're trying to break it down and understand its molecules. But that's my job. I'm a biologist. That's what I do, and so I do see this pretty flower. and I see its evolutionary history for the past couple 100 million years. I see the fact that it's got stripings that reflect UV light rather than the visible spectrum that we can see, so that bugs can see it more easily. So it's actually more vivid and more colorful and more dynamic than what I can even see. I see all the chemical pathways going on through it. I see the photosynthetic pathway, whether it's a C3 or a C4 plant or a CAM plant. It's going to have totally different photosynthetic pathways that are going to be spatially or temporally isolated based on their environment for several millions of years. I see like all these amazing intricacies of how it's put together, the atoms that go into it, the way those atoms are connected. I see the different parts of the cell and how they work together and how they function and how it builds into its ecosystem. And it's also pretty. So I see so much beauty plus the aesthetic. And so when you look at love, I see this amazing story of like how the brain works and how humanity works and how relationships work. And I see like the triggering that she does in my brain and like what she does to me. And also it feels nice. So like I think that I see so much more. If anything, you're missing out. You're missing out on the beauty of reality.
You think I'm missing out? You don't think it's you? You think it's me?
I am teasing you a little bit, but at the end of the day, I don't think I'm missing out at all. No, I think I see so much more, and I think I'm enjoying it just as much as you, if not more, because I also see the background.
Yeah, but like part of, it's not always about enjoying things. I mean, sometimes you have to do the right thing, even if it's a little uncomfortable.
Sure, absolutely, and I can make justification for that as well without magic.
Yeah, and you need magical thinking for that to be the case. You don't
Yeah.
think that Forrest has an understanding of the rights and responsibilities that he owes to his partner without a sense of magic to it?
I have a qualm with you guys describing the belief, or we'll call it theism. We can call it belief in God. You call it whatever you want to call it, but to call it magic, I think is not being genuine.
We're not. To be clear, we're not calling the belief magic. We're saying you believe in magic. You're believing in something supernatural that's
Yeah.
becoming intercessory into our lives through means that are not scientifically explainable. That's magic.
And my what I'm trying to tell you is that not everything can be explained through science, and I think that's very clear. Unless you disagree,
Not
I'm willing to listen.
there are some things that we haven't explained in science yet.
Mhm.
I have yet to be convinced that there isn't anything that can't be explained through science.
Yeah, where do you get your basis for saying that it cannot be explained through science? That sounds like a conclusion. How did you arrive at that conclusion?
Well, belief. It's the idea of belief. It takes a tiny leap of faith sometimes. Sometimes it takes a large leap of faith, but nonetheless, I mean, belief always takes a little bit of faith.
Okay.
So my question to you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, what is your definition of faith then?
It's belief. It's the idea that maybe you don't understand it 100%, but you're willing to accept it.
But there is evidence to support a particular conclusion, yes?
But do you always need, I mean, is that your worldview, that you need evidence for everything that you're going to believe in life? Or
it's my question, Frank, that there needs to be some evidence for it, right? You don't just believe things because it's a thing that's believable. Everything that you believe
let's talk about,
is based upon.
Let's talk about
Frank, you're
I
evading the question.
No, I'm addressing the question. Let's talk about faith, or trust, rather. It's something that you can't really prove, right? But it's something you believe in. That's the whole idea behind trust. Do you trust nothing?
So the question then is there any position whatsoever that you could not take on faith?
I think if you can disprove faith, fine, go for it. But I think you're going to have a tall order ahead of you.
Well, that's not what I asked. I asked, is there anything at all that you could not believe in based on faith?
No. Faith is not a matter of disbelief. Faith is a matter of belief. So
for sure, absolutely. So now, coming from a skeptical standpoint, Like, what sort of things could you not believe in based on a skeptical worldview or a scientific worldview? The list is as long as you'd like. I don't believe in unicorns or gremlins or the Russell's teapot or that the Earth is flat or any of these things because I have evidence against these things. I don't have evidence for something existing, so I don't believe it exists, or I have sufficient evidence that something does exist, so I believe that it does. Like, that's the way that I work with everything. And in fact, I'm 99% sure that's the way that you work with everything else as well. It's just in this one area that now you have this
think you
special
have no
set of
faith.
rules called faith.
I
You
don't
said
really,
you said I have no
honestly,
faith.
dude, I don't want to get into I don't want to get into this like the way you're addressing this argument. I think it's important to have faith, and
Why don't
Why?
you want to
a matter
get
of
into
belief
the
in God.
why, Frank? Why don't you want to get into the way we're addressing this argument? Is it because you don't have a good answer for the way that we're approaching it, and that you want to skip over it and jump back into whatever script or proselytizing you want to get into, or is it for some other reason?
No, that's not the reason. The reason is faith is it's a very important aspect of the human experience, not the atheist
Why?
experience, the human
Yeah.
experience.
Why is it important?
Because that's the way society functions. I mean, when you're driving down the road in your car, you have faith that people aren't just going to swerve into your lane and kill you.
I have a
And
reasonable,
don't.
and on the
I have a
road.
reasonable.
I absolutely
Yeah.
don't. I learned defensive driving. I make sure to look around and make sure if anybody try, because people have swerved into my lane before. I keep my eyes open for that. I'm not going to just trust everybody on faith. No, absolutely not.
Yeah, and Frank, I have a reasonable expectation that most people are going to be trying to drive their car because they are motivated to get to their destination and to continue living. I don't close my eyes and just drive based upon some notion of belief or unfounded faith, as you might put it, because I want it to be so. I have a reasonable expectation that's based upon my experiences, and my experience is much the same. I've been in car accidents as well. So
Mhm.
it's proportionate to my experiences. I know that stuff could hit the fan at any time. And so I put my seatbelt on. I have insurance for my car. I keep my hands on the wheel and my eyes on the road. And I try to maintain the speed with the traffic around me. That's not faith. That's I don't know. I don't know what that is.
That's just
What is
being a
that?
decent
What do
human
you call
being.
it?
Right.
Obeying the
That's
laws? Maybe?
that's just being no, it's being
Yeah.
responsible is what that is.
Yeah, I think
That's
so.
the
Yeah.
and that's the point that I was saying a second ago is that like you don't use faith for most things in your life, Frank. Like I don't think that there are very many things around you that you could point to that you just have a blind belief in because you feel like it. Most everything. If I
No,
told you
no,
that
wait, I have to stop you. I have to stop you there for a second
yeah,
because like that's one of my
sure.
like gigantic pet peeves with a lot of religious people, blind faith.
Okay.
Faith for me has been something I've struggled with a lot. I had to
Uh-huh.
think about a lot. I had to like look at the science. I had to look at the reality. I had to draw my own intuitive beliefs from it. It was not something
Sure.
that came to me like I just snap of the fingers. Okay, it was something that I had to struggle with and fight with, and then eventually,
Right,
I
but you
believe.
are arguing for something that you don't have actual concrete evidence for and that you don't have a scientific perspective on. So you are
Well,
arguing
we
for
can
the
talk about
idea
the
that
DNA
at some
molecule
point
if you guys want to talk about.
I
If you want to go
we've
into
already
the
been going for
evidence, we can
13
talk
minutes.
about
I
that.
encourage you to call back when I'm on and talk about DNA with me. I would love to do so. But like as far as just this one point, which is all we have time for, is that you are arguing for something that your best answer is I don't have an answer and therefore it must be something
No, that's not
supernatural.
true.
And that's not good
I
enough.
think when you look when we look at the complexity and the atheist kind of what do they call it, the red herring, the atheist red herring is that just because it's complex and we can't understand it, therefore theists claim that creation is, but that's not the way it actually works. When you look at the nature of the complexity, the idea that there's a language behind this molecule, there's a language behind our voices, that's what really drives this idea. I mean, and I think that's a really good, that's probably some of the best evidence we have for creationism.
And I have been studying
so much
that
of it's
language at
complicated.
universities for almost a decade now, and there's nothing supernatural about it. So like, just because something seems interesting, it doesn't mean that it's supernatural. It doesn't mean that there's a God behind it. And even if you could say for sure that, pick your favorite, DNA, human eyes, language, the solar system, photosynthesis, what, any random thing that's so amazingly, astoundingly complex, even if you could prove that we have no explanation for it, and that the best explanations we have completely just fail to do anything, and that we just have no way of knowing how this amazingly complex thing came into existence, that's not an argument for creationism or for God or for belief or any of that. All you could then say is, I don't have an explanation for this. And then you have your whole work cut out for you trying to go find one. Because when you have an explanation for something or a proposed explanation, you need evidence to back it up. So, like, our explanations of biodiversity, of evolution, of the origin of life, of DNA and language, and whatever else you want to point to, our explanations of those things are based in the evidence that we have. If we had different evidence, we'd have a different explanation. Your basis of what you're saying here is, this is so amazing, it must be magical. And that's just not good enough for a belief system.
That's actually, you're doing the red herring thing again. Like, there's
I just repeated what you said
scientifically, and
that doesn't matter. I just explained why that doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yes, we can explain it, but even if we couldn't, that isn't an argument for God. You have to do the work of proving this God exists, and then prove that it can make things like DNA, and then prove that it did make DNA, and then start proving how. Those are the steps you have to take to get me to believe in this God, based on like DNA or whatever. Like, you can't just say you don't have a good explanation, therefore you have to go with mine. That's not how science or thinking works.
You're diminishing life in this kind of simplistic context where, you know, it's like you're looking at a computer basically, and you can understand how the transistors in there, and the RAM and the processor and the hard drive all kind of work together, but you're forgetting the bigger picture, which is that life has a purpose. That a computer was designed with a reason and a purpose, and I think if you're going to look at it like that, then I think that's a good place to maybe start for an analogy to try to get you guys on the right track.
So this will be the last thing, because we are running out of time with this call. You said just now that life has a purpose. Why do you believe that? What evidence do you have for that? I think that sounds horrible. I don't believe there's a purpose for life, and I certainly don't want a purpose for life. That sounds awful. So, like, what makes you think there's a purpose for life?
What makes you think there isn't? Just to play devil's advocate.
From where would we derive such a purpose? What does that even mean to say purpose? Do you mean like that there's like a function, or do you mean like there's an intention of life existing? Like, somebody made life on purpose to do a thing?
Yeah, like, why is that so hard to believe?
Because I have no reason to believe that there's a God, and even if there was a God, I wouldn't worship it, because any God that would run a world like this is clearly a monster, and also because I don't want to be told what to live for. I don't want to be born in a situation where I have a purpose. That sounds hideous to me, to have my whole life, no freedom, no choices, nothing for me, just no matter what I do, no matter what I try, it's all for this intention that somebody else set out for me before I was born. That sounds hideous. That's awful. But again, that's not an argument against it. It's just why I think it's shitty. Like, at the end of the day, I just don't have evidence to believe that it's real, so I don't.
Yeah, and I noticed that, Frank, when we asked what your evidence was that there was a purpose, you flipped it.
I
and
wanted
asked
to get
us,
into the DNA molecule, but you guys don't want to talk about it. You guys don't want to talk.
We don't have time for it.
Yeah, it sounds like you want to do
20
a lot
minutes
of,
on this call.
Yeah, it sounds like you want to do a lot of things, Frank. But every time we ask you a question, you just flip it and ask us a question in return. That's kind of not how it works.
I was ready to answer
you've got,
question, but
okay, so why do
you
you think that there is a purpose? Why do you think that there is a purpose? We said why we don't want there to be a purpose. I certainly don't want an overlord slave master, but apparently that's more appealing to you. But why do you think that there is a purpose?
All right. Let's start from what does it mean for you? What does purpose
Again,
mean to you?
you asked a question. I'd like to hear what your answer
Well,
is.
if we're gonna argue about purpose, we need to define it. I think is what I meant.
Dude, we've been on this call for
Yeah.
20 minutes, and I've got a million other callers waiting. So, like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to just, so we got to get an answer out of you because,
Yeah.
like Johnny just said, every time you ask us a question, we give you an answer, and every time we ask you a question, you ask us another question.
Frank, you're good. You're good and squirrely
No.
when it comes to answering questions, but don't think that it's not seen. Go ahead and answer the question, or we have to move on.
All right. What's your question?
What evidence do you have that life has a purpose?
We need to talk about the DNA molecule. We need to talk about the way it's a structured language. In the beginning, there was the word. This is John 1:1.
I have studied the DNA molecule. It's not a great language for a few reasons, and also there's no reason to believe that it's supernatural whatsoever. It actually shows clear evidence of evolution written into your DNA. And I use written here as an analogy, not like there's actually some. I feel I should be clear. So, like,
Careful.
DNA is absolutely not a good evidence or argument for a creator if you study DNA.
You don't think so? You don't think it's a 4-character language?
Very much no.
Okay. Well, what's your evidence for that? Why you sit here and judge me about evidence?
You said that DNA isn't a forebearer to language? I need you. Is that what you're at? There,
No,
because we can't.
Is DNA not a language? Is there not a word there?
I mean, you could colloquially call it a code, but like the way DNA is like actually functioned into, like, the way that it does a thing is through transcription, converting DNA, reading DNA to make an RNA molecule. Then that RNA has to mature. It has to have exons cut out and then introns spliced together. And then that mature mRNA then has to be translated into a protein in sets of 3 codons that correspond to amino acids. And like this, it's this hierarchical step-by-step process. It is a biochemical process. It's not a language in reality. That's just an analogy. It's a way that we describe it. Same way with saying that, like, a code. It's just an analogy. It's not like there's actually like a set digitized sequence where you have this exact thing. Like, it's a very complicated system, but it's not a precursor to language. It's not a language in and of itself. No, that's not how that works.
Are you like you said you're a biologist, right?
Yes, I have multiple degrees in biology. I'm currently finishing my master's in bioanthropology. I study and teach biology for a living.
So, when God said that He created man and women separate, are you gonna? Do you have a biological argument against that?
That is a completely different thing, and we are 23 minutes into this call.
It was
So
a little bit of a pivot. I understand it.
If you'd like, Frank, you are welcome to call back in anytime that either Johnny or I are on and continue this conversation. But like, so far, we've been going 23 minutes and we haven't gotten anywhere. So I'm going to move on to the next caller. But I appreciate you calling in. Please, if you want to continue talking about any of this, call us back.
Thanks.
Take care.
Frank. Bye.